But yes, what the real main show after Ireland have claimed their Triple Crown is going to take place in the Stade de France in Paris on Saturday evening. The crescendo of what has been a wonderful Six Nations, what promises to be a wonderful Super Saturday, as France look to claim the Grand Slam and put to bed that 12-year drought of Six Nations titles.
Yeah, it would look like one of those mid-aughts tournaments where Ireland get a Triple Crown and look very good, but lose out to a France Grand Slam. Haven't seen those ones in a while.
I will tongue-in-cheekily declare Ireland to be Triple Crown winners once, not twice. That way you're spoiling things.
I know.
But this match is for it all, and it's just perfect for France at home in the Stade de France. 8 o'clock kickoff. GMT, 9 o'clock local time, right in the cauldron that has been that stadium for the last year. Really, it's just been incredible atmosphere since the fans have come back.
Truly.
They couldn't have asked for a better picture. Taking the game is Jaco Piper of South Africa, with Mike Adamson and Frank Murphy on the sidelines and Marius Jonker in as TMO. I don't know if France had wanted any other way. England coming to town,
Le Crunch, Le Crunch for Le Grand Slam. That's kind of what they want to be in. Like, that's the old enemy. They want to take them on. They want to take them on home soil with a raucous kind of festival carnival atmosphere going on in the Stade de France. That's exactly where they want this. They've managed to get over the last 2 weeks of the potential banana skins of both Murrayfield and Cardiff, which is just to get over both of them. Grand Slam still on track. A few wibbles here or there, but they've come through them with flying colours past those tests. So momentum is definitely with this French side as they roll in to the final week. England themselves, they're 5-2 in the last 7 Six Nations meetings between the sides, including a 23-20 victory last year. But France are the ones, with
France
the momentum.
France have taken a hammer to all those records. It was they've lost such and such games against Scotland, but not this team. That's kind of, they have been putting to bed all of those trends in recent weeks. So I wouldn't give that too much credence. But this, it'll possibly be the last time the two sides meet in Paris this side of the World Cup as well. So that'll be definitely on England's mind, just leaving a positive memory there as opposed to a negative one. But for France, history beckons, and it is all about the here and now. It's a pressurized environment for sure. Their fans all are sitting in expectation, waiting to shower them with praise and beckon them home joyfully. But at the same time, they do expect a win here, and that is its own pressurized environment.
A win or bust is exactly where it is. Not just because it's the Grand Slam and to not have the Grand Slam would sully it, but they will know going into this what they have to do. But
they could have the title.
They could have the title if France. If Scotland turned Ireland over, they'll know that it's moot, but they'll still want the Grand Slam. But the likely scenario, and the one that they're plotting for at this point in the week, is that they'll have to win or bust, and it's again that question mark of when is this France team going to win a trophy? They're hoping the answer is this weekend.
Yes, and they have been fabulous in this tournament. They will feel they've deserved it, and they've thrived in that pressurized environment in recent weeks.
That defense that bails them out. It's definitely true. For England, it's more just a chance to save face on the final weekend, get back to a winning record of some description as well, and manage their expectations and kind of ride a bit of momentum into their own summer tour.
And if it goes badly, they're off tour in Australia, if it goes badly, with Wales getting a likely 5 points and Scotland potentially being game enough to get maybe a losing bonus point in Dublin, they could finish 5th again in back-to-back years, which would just put so much pressure on Eddie Jones, possibly too much pressure. I mean, I don't think that England rugby, just don't think rugby in general is that knee-jerk. I think they will let him take the World Cup regardless of what happens. But gee whiz,
they hammer blow to the team.
They don't want to go 5th back to back.
No, they don't.
Heading off for a tough tour to Oz as well, where the likes of Tupou are waiting, and Australia are looking to put to bed what happened to them a few years back. It could take this England team that's full of potential to dark places. But that said, they'll take encouragement from how well their tight five and set piece performed in Dublin, and will look to add to that and heap the pressure on France.
And hope that they're the ones to wilt, because they're in a position where it's all to play for, but nothing really to kind of, not the same kind of pressure that France are going under, or the scrutiny. So if that they can use that to play
with a chip on your shoulder as well. People are doubting us. People don't think that we're world class, but we are.
Maybe I'll try this speculative pass and maybe it'll work. All of that from England, but we are going to move on and look at the previews, the meat of them, the winning conditions for both sides, and we're going to start with the home side, the hosts, that is La France, Les Bleus, and Le Grand Slam is all that's on the minds for them. Nothing else really matters, to be fair. It's win, get that Grand Slam, get that rolling. It's 1 year out from the World Cup. This would be, on the macro, just things ticking along according to the plan. When you look back on the Autumn Nations Cup and they were talking about blooding players of a certain age demographic, and it was all by and large 23 to 25 year olds that they were blooding at that time, and the team looked ropey and inexperienced at that because it was mostly youngsters. And now those kids are a few years older and they look much more mature and really have benefited from that blooding early, and they're ready to peak in time for this World Cup. But not before.
Or right now.
Right now. This is it. Like the plan is to try and capture some silverware before you go into that, and that starts here. They put themselves in a great position. They'll obviously pre-kick-off be a big bag of nerves, because how could you not be? You know, they're only human, but it's about how they manage themselves with all that, and eat nerves. Eat nerves results is the old adage. Try and do a bit of that, and arrive to the pitch of this battle and they set the tone early.
They have started well every game so far in this competition. Stellar. They have never had to come back.
The longest they've had to wait for a try nearly has been around 8 minutes or 9.
Yeah,
isn't it?
That has been the key to their success. I mean, we don't know what this French team looks like when they're having to chase a game.
Yes,
and they don't want to know.
They don't want to know.
Right? They want to,
especially in a Grand Slam decider and a final day shootout where it's like every second that ticks on and you're not in the lead. That's more pressure. Yeah,
exactly. They want to get after England from the off, and one of the ways that they've done it is by negating an early kicking game with excellence off kick return.
Kick return try.
That's
punishment for it.
Dupont, Jaminet, Villiers. These guys
run it back very nicely.
They link up very well, and they do. If England are trying to play a pressure kicking game, getting a little offload away, beating a man one-on-one and then linking up with someone just to get even half a line break and set up their own offense does change the picture of the game. And when England are playing a kind of a rudimentary game as it is coming into this one, that's the way that they can look to just
considering the kicks in field that Wales presented England with forced them to launch off kick return rather than set piece, and you could see that England were nowhere near as assured as what France had been bringing to that kick return transition game. France had been just all of their instincts dialed into one to try and sweep across, and in a few phases manage to execute and find the space. That's what it's got to be about, because the kicking game will be important, but they can't afford to be suckered into a kicking duel between.
No, and to be fair, they've been the best side in this competition off kick return. They've been brilliant at it, and they need to bring that to this game, because England will kick at them.
They will. The offensive game that England brought in the last few weeks is to kind of truck it up, especially from the middle third, truck it up a few times, run out of ideas kicking in the air, and France need to be ready for that and ready to diffuse that. But to be honest, one would think that a couple of weeks away in Cardiff and then and Scotland would prepare you for that kind of onslaught.
Yeah, and one of the things, obviously, it hasn't been perfect from them, especially away from home the last couple of weeks. They didn't play well from the midfield last week, France. They had that one kick return that led to the try.
They got suckered into that kind of game. We were seeing Dupont's box kicking game as he was running away from a ruck and then haphazardly kicking it up in the air. And they're not really built to do that. They're not very good at it. We were critical of them in the last few years for getting into those kind of territory games and just never really winning them. So it's such that yes, their offense looks bloody brilliant. It's a shame they're only generating 3 chances per game because they're never winning the territory exchanges. So kick return transition is much more into their identity, plays into the crowd that are going to be dying to see a bit of that magical rugby. And play your own game.
At the start of the game as well, one of the areas that they haven't launched that well off is line out. Actually, early against Ireland, they had a great try that came off a kick into touch, but it was because they took the line out quickly.
Yes,
and went going. They're more comfortable off kick return. I expect Eddie Jones to have his homework done on that. I expect England to kick for touch and not kick for infield when they are exiting. And then the question becomes, can France launch off line out? Because a few times this season I've watched them have a line out midfield that has been mauled and then box kicked. And that's they launch very well off scrums, they attack very well off kick return, but for some reason the line out hasn't been their friend. And that's definitely something that I'd look to see them rectify.
It's getting a few here because Toji's on the other side.
And Will Rowlands did a job on them the last time out. That line out is going to have to be important.
And to be honest, as good as their scrum has been, and the dominant showing they put in against Ireland was encouraging, but just coming off the back of that England scrum is no joke when it's coming to town. So being able to contain that, they do launching off scrums, They're going to have to get that set piece right as well. Big jobs for Cyril Bay, Wuni Antonio. That front row matchup is just box office. To be honest, that front five matchup is just box office as well.
If they can get on top of England there, though, they will be in a great position, and they have the capacity.
If they can even get parity there, they'll be in a great position because, like as we were saying on transition, like once the line is broken, I have confidence in their offense to find the tries against this England defense.
They're more dangerous than England. They're more there's no doubt about that. So what they don't want to have happen is to get suckered into an England game, which they kind of had happen against Wales. England are going to want to play pressure kicking game. They're going to want to play intense collisions. They're going to want to play set piece footy. France, like in the last couple of away games, and it was away from home, so you do have to bear in mind that they played the second half extremely passively, just kicking downfield, hoping that the other side would make a mistake. And against Scotland, they were lucky that Scotland did play into their hands and tried to run the ball against their defence from deep, and they were able to then generate turnovers and get some fun tries. But England aren't going to do that. England are going to kick it back to them. They're going to play pressure ball, and if they get sucked into that game, then all of a sudden the power tackling and the turnovers that these England teams,
the hustling pedigree of guys like Itoje getting into your breakdown and making it a mess, and getting into your line out and making it a mess, and
it'll tell, especially if they haven't been able to get a couple of tries on the board in the first quarter.
If they're behind and it's minute 60 in that scenario, that's when it might tell.
Or even minute 45. They played passive second halves, and that might be something that they're going to have to right if they can't get their helter-skelter start going, which obviously is planned.
That's plan A, for sure. Defensive end is what their bread and butter, though. They will love the matchup here of this floundering and somewhat fledgling and a little bit kind of shy English offense as well. Certainly on the show evidence of last week, like kind of reticent to pull the trigger because they don't quite know what they're doing. They said Edwards' defense should be confident in its ability to mop all of that up, gobble all of that up, and be dominant, force them to kick and force them to kick poorly, force them to kick on their own terms. That's what the difference between proactive defense and proactive kicking versus reactive kicking is. Normally 7 points to France. If you're kicking reactively and scuffing it down the middle of the field, that's normally 7 points when this France team dial it in. So those are the pictures they want to create.
The last weekend, one scuffed spiral from all his great spirals, and if that was enough for France. So forcing those bad kicks from Marcus and getting pressure on him. I mean, I'm backing Gael Ficou on the outside and the likes of Francois Cross and Greg Aldred on the inside to just make this a very uncomfortable day for Marcus Smith. I mean, the English offense hasn't had rhythm, it hasn't had much shape to it. Marcus has got the ball, he hasn't had runners on his shoulder. They haven't been able to cultivate good relationships. Himself and Slade haven't been able to link up, and Ficou's such a good defender.
Himself and Malins are the closest I could see to it,
dropped.
And he's now out, but he was the closest in the early exchanges to maybe reading off what Slade's shape or what Smith's kind of shape and go is. We know that Dombrant has a bit of telepathy with him, but he's like, it just it hasn't worked.
They've also a new attack coach in, a guy with a rugby league background whose name escapes me right now, but that hasn't worked either. Eddie Jones's shelling of his whole backroom staff and then hiring a new one has left them definitely at least in the infancy of developing a side. And from the French defence's point of view, getting after Smith, shutting down his options, and just one or two phases they'll have them.
If they have them kicking the whole time and limiting their scoring potential to like the 15 points they scored last week from kicks or something like that, then they will be in a great position.
They'll know it's one or two tries, it's one or two moments.
20 plus points at home in Paris with this crowd for the Grand Slam. They'll fancy that task if they can manage to make the game about it. Like obviously getting into that scrap and getting into that kick heavy approach and box kicking themselves. Those are the trappings. Getting nervy and not really playing your game.
Yeah, and just getting out muscle, allowing Itoje and Dombrant to get after your ball, to get on top of you. I mean, this game is going to be like the biggest threat that England pose to France is their physicality. And their capacity to make shite of their ball, and that's where France, who had that explosive performance in the power game against Ireland the last time they were in this stadium, blowing this very brilliant Irish pack away for large parts of that first half, they need a similar showing here against England. And if they do that against England, they'll actually be in a better position to win this game than they were that game, because England don't have the same offense that Ireland do
to come back at them. Exactly. True. And then the other challenge that will be posed to is the aerial game again. Jaminet, he's brilliant at many things. He's not the best fullback in the world at just owning
the high ball,
owning those skies. And we saw Liam Williams last week causing problems. We saw
Hugo
England, Keenan and the Irish
Smith,
back three causing problems. We see Freddie Stewart look very good in the air himself.
To be fair to Marcus Smith, like his kicking last week, his bomb kicking was excellent.
Was very good. Whether to compete in the catch or one of the 3-pointers they got came from Hugo Keenan, gathered the catch, but then the follow-up was good. Stewart smashes him and then marching straight in for a steal. Pictures like that are what England are going to try and paint, and to be honest, they've been doing that under Eddie Jones since he's come in. The old box kick up to very coordinated chase to try and chop and jackal. You got to be aware of that game, and Jaminet, a big test for him to orchestrate those back three men to try and diffuse that one of England's ins.
It's the number one challenge, but they'll be thinking to themselves, even if England recover a kick in our 22,
manage to get a 3 or 6 points out of that kicking game.
Yeah, it's like you've recovered the ball. You're on our 22. Try and break us down, and that is their great strength. That is what has got them to this position, and that's what they'll back to win them the championship.
And I'm sure that's what Sean Edwards will be excited about, more so than the flashy kick return tries, whatever. Yes, but it's indeed. That great set where they only went nowhere for 2 phases and then we jackled them. That's what he loves to see at his own 22. The other thing is that the counter rucking game that they bring, the explosive. They don't really need to fear England's capacity to get numbers and find the edge too much until England demonstrate that they do. So get after that ruck, get after that clean ball and create messy ball, and then you'll have messy kicks coming your way, and that's where you can get your offense going for France.
No question. But from the flip side of things, England also hope that they have a path to winning this game. I think we hope they have a path to winning this game.
Yes, indeed.
They come into this one obviously on an interesting ebb, I think we'll say. They were pretty bullish in their determination to see the bright side after their defeat in Twickenham.
It's very admirable optimism from Eddie Jones and the boys.
And Jamie George talking about it was his proudest performance in an England shirt. To be fair to them, like they've got a bit of stick. Like
to be fair to Jamie George, he was in that front row, and from that perspective, it was a bloody great performance and a lot of confidence to take to Paris.
He was thinking pretty personally there, I dare say as well. But like to be fair to them, like there's been a bit of blowback given just their sheer lack of offensive output.
Sure,
but it kind of reminded me of when Ireland in the Autumn Nations Cup went out there and lost the game 18-7, and actually the 7 was a late intercept, but it was basically 18-0, and they dominated possession and they had the better of the territory, and their offense ended up scoring 0, and we were like, oh, for God's sake, they can't do anything. And then they came out after the game and Andy Farrell was like, tears in his eyes, I couldn't be prouder of the effort. And it's like, what are you talking about? It kind of reminds me of that in a way. It was like the foundation was there. Like they knew they could compete physically with England. That was a huge stepping stone for this Ireland team because they'd been blown away by them so many games in a row. And even though they lost the game, they dominated the forward battle and they were able to win it. And in a similar way, in the same venue, only with the teams reversed, England might now feel like they have the baseline from which to work, in that they defended very well. They're the number one turnover generating defense in the tournament. Their set piece is now looking elite. It's looking insanely good. Ellis Genge with a performance from the ages.
One tackles as well, like that Simmons tackle on Tyg Furlong, like some of those hits are brilliant as well.
And they have a guy in Itoji who is, if not the best player in the world, very, very close.
Good. Like his contribution is always just at least worthy of a few points, just in terms of the amount of his plays just tell, and the momentum shift that his little defensive play on to stop that potential Daragh try last week, and what followed was like a 40-odd minute purple patch for England. Such was the seismic nature of that play.
He got after them all. He unsettled them in the line out. Genge was unsettling Ireland in the scrum.
So they similar in both those set pieces, because if you can get after a French scrum in Paris, that is something that the knowledgeable French crowd are aware of. And if the first few scrums can start looking anything like the ones back in Twickenham last week, and that's the kind of thing that gets a murmur rippling around, rather than the carnival atmosphere of let's win the Grand Slam. That's what England need to set into the minds, that doubt, that lingering doubt. If they can start with that, and then suddenly France haven't started well, they've started conceding a few scrum penalties to Ellis Genge, then it's game on. That's where England want to be.
No question. And even just going back to that point about the confidence that they had from last week, they now have a pretty elite foundation, like Italy that we talked about earlier, like Argentina that we maybe discussed as being able to kick on from there, like Ireland 18 months ago.
Sure.
They got the defense going, they got the forward pack going, they now have an elite set piece, a very, very good defense with some excellent operators, and that now is a foundation from which they can build their offense, and they feel confident in that.
Yeah.
But
it needs to build quick.
Like for this game, I mean, going forward, I think they're actually in a great position to be class come the World Cup.
Sure.
I think
that's what Eddie Jones will be reassuring the boards and powers that
exactly,
be.
He's talking like, look at France, like it really doesn't take that long. Look at South Africa, the last World Cup. It doesn't take a full cycle. It takes a year and a half to develop a team, and he thinks this is a new team. They've already got their foundations. They just need to work on the offense,
and they do.
But for this game,
offensive returns so far, like in between Scotland game, the Wales game, and the Ireland game, their offense has yielded one try.
Yeah. That Marcus Smith break off the maul against Scotland. Against Wales, they scored one, which was an overthrow from a line-out. Their offense did not manage to score a try. Against Ireland, they did not manage to score a try. They managed to do a kick pressure game that generated turnovers, that generated 3-pointers, and that's where their scores are coming from. But they haven't been able to score tries. And I think first and foremost, they need to learn one of the lessons from last week that they possibly didn't learn, that they should learn, is that they need to kick the corners. They have a great set piece.
Itoje is dominating the air. Itoje v Woki is a big battle, and Woki will try and get a playoff, but I'd still like George to Itoje. For Sarries, it's flawless, and for England, it's been flawless as well. Trust that access to try and yield some 5 and 7 pointers for you, because away from home in Paris, you're gonna need them. You're just gonna need them, and that is one of the lessons to glean from last week.
They're not about to turn into a world-beating offense with loads of shape where they can take it through 6 or 7 phases and open up this French defense. I don't see that coming this week.
But Marcus Smith wins for Quins all the time, so maybe we could just do that to France and Paris.
It just doesn't seem likely. I mean, it is possible. I still think like the reason I think I'm so confident they'll be good is because they do all have the skills. Like Smith, Slade, Marchant should be better than it's
been. Even all of that.
And they will take some confidence as well from that South Africa game. They can mine back that far where they actually scored 3 tries against the world's best defence next to this Edwards defence, that they dialed it in that day, and they managed to score off two off line outs where they managed to get to the edge really quick, like the Marchant line that won them that game for the Rafi Quirk try. They will need to produce those kinds of plays, but they'll also need to be a little braver and know that if they have to resort to the pressure kicking game, they can do that effectively. It can yield them penalties in the opposition half that have to become 5s and 7s instead of 3s.
It does. And part of it is, like we were saying, as well as that, backing yourself to go for it. The macro from their offense is that it hasn't had a rhythm at all. And the Edwards defense is going to try and shut them down. But even if they're going through these 1 or 2 phases to try and set up a kick, it'll be more effective if they can get their head around what kind of tempo they're trying to play with. And with the new halfbacks, they haven't quite settled on that yet. We haven't seen, and that's where there's doubt all over, the rippling across the back line and across the forward runners, and as much as they're all individually class runners, it's not quite gelled yet, and they're going to hope that maybe some of that sparks into life if they can just be a little bit more deliberate in their tempo off the base. If their runners are good enough, like Sam Simmons running onto quick ball, like that'll cause problems to any defence, even a Sean Edwards defence. So try and be a bit more kind of proactive in setting a tempo when they have the ball, and obviously clearing rucks, hitting rucks, being diligent in that regard, because Edwards will get after them. But then they can start to kind of put the pieces of their game together and hopefully put the squeeze on France, because they're in that beneficial position of having like no weight of expectation, and all of the pressure, as soon as they get 1 or 2 things right, all of the pressure shifts to France, and then it's easier to play in that environment.
And so listen, the offense is the big work on. Can they generate points? I think you've outlined that they're going to have to be it off set piece, be it off first or second phase from deeper. They're going to have to find a way to find scores.
Be aware that obviously like trying to find scores is one thing, but pay due diligence, like Galthié who's out there, so don't be reckless with it.
Indeed.
Like,
and
if it's not working, don't just keep hammering away.
Play the kick pressure game, and that's where you go into like their comfort zone, where they really want to make a game of this, is in the contact area and the physicality and the scrums and the lineouts and the defense, and that's really the game in a lot of ways, is whether or not they can bottle up the early explosive start of the French with good defending, with perhaps steals at the line out, take that set piece away from them. I think they will kick for touch when France put the ball deep into England's half. England are going to want to kick not bombs. Bombs are for the offensive half, the other half.
Yeah.
Deep kicks towards the touchline, set up line-outs, attack them at the line-out.
Yeah.
And if they can get purchased there, as Wales did, then they can just take away a huge platform.
Yeah, if they can set a Toji after their line-out and also after their half-back as well, if you can get a Toji, like a Toji v Dupont is high
That's
level
it.
stuff.
Like,
but
Toji is the master at snagging a scrum half and killing that play, and Dupont is the master at evading exactly that play.
Getting snagged and still getting the ball away.
But Toji, if there is a man to stop Dupont doing that, it's probably a Toji.
Yes, that's certainly an in for them as well, potentially. Yeah, towing that line between just being proactive and aggressive, but also not ill-disciplined. They need to stay on the right side of the whistle as well with it.
And the other thing is turnovers. Like, France are obviously going to be playing this helter-skelter game. They like to get to the edge. They like to be put it through a lot of hands.
To get their wingers involved.
They have been excellent at the offensive breakdown, but if England can time some steals, they are the top turnover defence in this competition. Itoje is top of the individual stats with 9 turnovers in the competition in 4 games.
Expect him to reach 10 before the end of this one.
And Dombrandt is tied second on 6 with
he hasn't even started, haven't even played all the games.
Indeed.
So in England do dial in a jackal, and a lot of those are proactive jackals from that kick game where they kick up a bomb, hit you, get in over you. That's 3 points.
What I will say though, from a defensive point of view, is like they still ended up conceding 4 tries last week. They have bad habits. They switch off on the short side. They switch off from quick tap penalties.
They switch off as soon as the whistle goes.
They switch off too damn often.
And
France are just like no other team for catching and switching off.
Dupont
will be so alive.
Even
to
a
that.
dialed out kick, a little pressure relieved. I'll just kick it down the field and we won't pay attention for the next 30 seconds. Oh no!
Exactly. So they're going to have to produce one of their more effective and focused defensive performances for the whole game to contain this excellent France attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. That said, the defence, it's a big challenge for England. I just think they have a lot to play for here. They can take some confidence from these last few weeks and go out there with a mind to try and to create this upset. Well, there's no reason why not. They have the tools. They know they do.
It's the toughest task for the likes of Winnie Antonio and the French scrum, and that who has relented a little bit since that domination of Ireland that happened.
It's been their most impressive showing.
Yeah, indeed. And so England, like Ellis Genge, obviously, just if he can replicate anything like that performance against Tadhg Furlong, it would be so big for them. But England will be conscious of the fact that France have been comfortably dominant in the tight 5 in all of these games in the last week.
If they can remove that from them,
it's been a comfort blanket for France dominating those tight 5 collisions. And if England can take that away, all of a sudden the edginess comes. All of a sudden, if the pressure kicking game is on, if they're stealing lineouts and they take a 6-0 lead, we don't know what that looks like for France. We don't know what it looks like.
It nearly came about when if Wales could have stuck that pass and gone in over and taken that lead, then we would have seen it, but we didn't. So England will be looking to try and create that picture for themselves, and then hoping that they're the team that are kind of forcing France to play a bit and kind of be proactive. And then the kick pressure is suddenly the right game because so France have to score and they're pegged back,
and then all of a sudden they're trying to run it from everywhere. They don't really know what they're doing.
That's the picture we've seen from that Autumn Nations Cup showing, and in these Le Crunchy matchups that we've seen recently, England's pressure game has been able to peg France back and get them play too much in the wrong area and look a little silly and reckless in what they're trying to do, and then capitalise. And that's the picture for Eddie Jones's men. Even with the new team, I think it's the same equation.
No question.
How do you see it going?
I think the gulf between the offenses is too great for England to overcome. I think England might paint that picture for some amount of minutes. I'm worried about their ability to score against this Edwards defence, and I think that France will certainly score, whether it's in the opening quarter as they have been doing, or just before half time.
You're not going to contain them forever.
They'll find a moment. England will switch off in a moment. Dupont will fancy a matchup and beat a man, and they'll find a try or 2 or 3, and England won't have the ability to generate enough points to respond. I think they'll be in this game, England. I think throughout they'll be in this game, but I don't see them actually having the ability to respond.
So what are you seeing then? France by what?
A bit. Enough to win the Grand Slam.
Well, it can be 1, it'll be enough. Yeah, I kind of think I see it going somewhere similar. I'm going to back to the home team to get it done and get the France Grand Slam rolling. I'm hopeful my green lens is kind of thinking, no, Eddie has a plan. No, he'll kick, he'll pressure, and France will fold, and then England will win by 3 or 5 points, and then it's Ireland's year.
Eddie does have a plan.
No, I know that.
We shall see.
Yeah, no,
if
I know.
It comes to fruition.
My head is.
He had a plan last week
My head
too.
is screaming France, despite my heart shouting defiantly that England might do it.
Yeah, and that is a rare thing for your heart to shout.
Yeah,
Never has it been heard shouting such things.
I know, yeah. And on Paddy's Day of all things, it's very confusing. But no, I'm fancying France for this one. I think they're good value for a Grand Slam this year. They deserve it, and they deserve it based on that game in Paris with us. To be honest, that wonderful test match that was seen the world over. I think they got the job done then, and have passed a couple of tricky away tests since then. And I think this one will just I think it'll come a little easier, to be honest. My head is saying that I think they might actually be able to get on top early and be way too much for England. I think they might even win it by more than a score if England's offense struggles the way it has.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah.
But listen, let us know how you guys think it'll go. Do you think that Ireland have a chance of sneaking the tournament yet, or should we focus our ambition solely on the Triple Crown?
Yes.
Are France going to do the slam? Are England going to come back? Let us know all your thoughts down below in the comments. Please be sure to like the vid. But with that, we're going to move on. Thank you very much for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to give it a like, share with your friends, and leave a comment down below as well. We really do want to hear your thoughts.